Good evening. In this class, there are many who are practicing healing, spiritual healing, from the standpoint of the message of the infinite way, and some who are teaching it. And for them, what I'm about to say is most important, because on it rests the foundation, or rather it is the foundation upon which rests the success of all their work. And to those who are not yet actively working as practitioners and teachers, but who must nevertheless practice and teach as individuals come to them for help, to you too, I will say that your entire future success in spiritual living and healing depends to a great extent on what I'm about to say. I'm referring to the meditation period that we have here and in all my work before the opening of a meeting, before the opening of a lecture or a class. Usually 10 or 15 minutes of silent meditation, and then, as a rule, another period when I come on the platform or into the class. This is the third night of our class on the new dimension, Christ. And the harmony, the completeness, perfection of our daily living in what we call the human world is entirely dependent on our understanding of this new dimension or Christ. Now, last night I brought out to you that tomorrow, next year, and the year after will only be continuations of today, unless some change takes place in your consciousness. In other words, the daily routine of human living does not vary much one year from another unless a new note is introduced into one's experience. And in our work, the new note that is introduced is Christ. Christ, the conscious activity of God in our affairs. Now then, in the human world, you are branches of the tree, and to all appearances, branches without a trunk of the tree. Can you visualize that? A tree with a lot of branches but no trunk. In other words, it would appear that each of us is a separate unit hanging in space or walking around in space, none of us attached to each other, none of us at one with each other, and certainly no sign of any God feeding, supporting, maintaining, or supplying us. Just ourselves, a lone branch suspended in space, attached to nothing. That is the human picture. Now, as you remember, we placed back that trunk of the tree where it belonged, and then found that actually each branch was connected with the trunk, or what the Master called the vine, and that the Father was the husbandman, that which supported, maintained, and sustained the vine and the branches. All right? In our experience, then, we are living that life of the branch, unconnected, disconnected, until through an activity of our own consciousness we begin to realize our connection, our contact, our oneness with the vine, the Christ, the Spirit of God, which in turn is rooted and grounded in the Father or the husbandman. You remember that, don't you? That must be clear to you. Now, everyone actually is at one with the vine and the Father. But because of a sense of separation that has come to pass through the ages, resulting in this prodigal experience, we now, as humans, are living the life of that unconnected and disconnected branch until through an activity of our own consciousness we become aware of our oneness with the vine and the Father. Now you know by now that merely declaring I am one with the Christ or I am one with God is only a step in the right direction. It is not the activity of Christ or truth, the activity of consciousness that gives you your freedom. No, no, no. It may lift you in consciousness to declare, I am one with the Father, I am one with God, and all the Father hath is mine. It may, if you will remember this consciously, every day, and twice or three times in a day, it may lift you into an attitude where in 1 second you come into the realization of that oneness, then your demonstration is made. Now then, since there is this sense of separation between me and the Father and all those who are to play a part in my life's experience, those to whom I can give and in turn who can reciprocate and make this a mutual relationship, since there seems to be this sense of separation owing to the fact that I'm here and you are out in various places of the world and we have no way of knowing each other or meeting each other, my work is in meditation, in quietness, to realize my oneness with God, the husbandman, the Father, the source, the one mind, the one consciousness. Now you know from past studies that there is but one mind, there is but one consciousness. And this mind or consciousness is functioning as your mind and mine, your mind and my mind. Not having learned that, I live my life in here and you live your life in there. But now that I know that there is only one mind, one consciousness, and that it is functioning as your mind and mine, I only have to close my eyes, perhaps not even close my eyes at all times, but much of the time in meditation, and here realize God as the one mind, the mind of you and the mind of me, Not the mind of you by name, since remember, at this moment I haven't yet met you. Don't know your name. Don't know where you are, what part of the world you may be in, or even if I did, I wouldn't know whether or not you were interested in our work. So I'm not thinking of you now as individuals. I'm not thinking of anyone I know. I'm thinking of only one thing. There is but one mind. That is my mind and the mind of all individual being, and we are all one in that mind. Therefore, that mind being the connecting link between me and my world and between you and your world, this one mind and our conscious oneness in and of this one mind establishes us in one place of one mind, and then all of a sudden I find myself someplace where you are, where those are gathered who are of my household, that is, who are a part of my demonstration and of whom I am part of their demonstration. That is what brought us together. That is what brought us together, because I daily, hourly realize my conscious oneness with God and my conscious oneness with all those of my household, of my own state of consciousness. And then, like magic, out of the whole world, we are brought together. Even after we are brought together, there is still a claim operating that you have a mind and I have a mind, and different levels of consciousness. And so what I may say, which may be very clear to me, may not at all be clear to you, since you are sitting out there with a different background, a different mind, a different environment, a different understanding, probably a different approach to metaphysics. That's the claim. But again, the truth is that since there is only one mind, it must understand itself. It must understand itself whether it appears as you or whether it appears as me, or whether we exchange ideas in and of that mind. And so again, when one of our students who has shown by his or her own demonstration that they too have received a measure of conscious realization of oneness, then before we get started, by meditating with you, they can bring all of us here into oneness with each other, merely through the realization that there's only one mind in this room. Whether that mind is the mind of Jones, Brown, Smith, or Joel makes no difference. It's the same mind, and therefore everything spoken is spoken by that mind, everything heard is heard by that mind. And naturally, everything that is uttered is interpreted by that mind to itself, within itself. Now you see that by the time I am here on the platform, we are about 7/8 one with each other, and sometimes completely one with each other. And so it just remains for me for a moment or two to be quiet with you and to have that unfoldment of one consciousness enfolding us, encircling us, upholding us, maintaining and sustaining us, and then we are ready to begin. But now you see that every practitioner and every teacher in this work understands that one of the greatest wrongs that they could do themselves or the infinite way is ever to seek a patient or a student. And so they know that if they ever are to be of service to themselves and the world, there is only one way in which to do it, and that is to sit quietly at home or in a church or in a center or wherever they can find their peace and realize consciously their oneness with God, and because of their oneness with God, their oneness with all those who belong to their demonstration. But now I want you to understand also that this does not merely apply to us in the spiritual ministry. I'd like you to see also that if you are a businessman, you are working with customers. If you're a wholesale, then you're working with retailers. If you're retail, you're working with individuals. And if you're an attorney, you're working with clients. And if you are something else, you're working with patients, or you're working with clients, or you're working with students, employers or employees. This same principle is the law under the harmony of your experience. Unless you wish to go out into daily battle of competition, daily battle of working with people antagonistic to your own ideas, unless you wish to just take your chances, pot luck, with whether or not you will have the right employer or right employee, or whether or not you will deal with the correct people, the right people for you, unless you wish to do that, you too will practice this form of meditation before you leave your home in the morning to embark upon any enterprise, commercial, social, ministerial, and establish firmly your oneness with the Father. And in the realization of your oneness with the Father, see if you can't realize that the mind of the Father, which is the mind of you, is the mind of every individual. And therefore, all those ready for the experience of association with you, by the attraction of that mind, is brought to you, and in the same wise, everyone whom you can serve or bless, you are led to. And so, just as I undertake my days from early morning to late at night and through the night with many, many periods of this meditation, and bringing about in the activity of my own consciousness this realization of oneness, so I say to you, whether you are engaging in the ministry, spiritual ministry, or whether you are in the business or professional world, do nothing at any time without first establishing consciously your oneness with God and your oneness with individual being. Now you will have brought into practical experience the new dimension, the fourth dimension. Everyone else is using the three-dimensional life. That is, all of the human activity of contact through seeing and touching and advertising and willpower and salesmanship. But here we enter life with a fourth dimension, which is one of not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, by my consciousness of truth, by my consciousness of my oneness with God and the oneness of all being with God, with the consciousness of God as individual being. And so you see how I establish in my own withinness the tree, every branch connected with the vine connected with the husbandman or father, and all being fed from that one divine universal source through us and as us. I wanted you to understand the nature of this meditation before the class, my meditation in the class, and the reason for it, so that you may benefit by my experience. My experience is beautiful because it has attracted to me so many of those appreciative of whatever the degree of understanding has been given me by grace. And there's only one reason that we come together in such agreement, and that is because it is not done on the human plane. You know that. There is nothing done humanly to bring us together. We are brought together only because of the activity of the Christ in your consciousness and mine, which leads us together. And the activity of the Christ is this realization of oneness. And this Christ, I think, we'll touch a little later this evening again. Please let it be clear to you how important meditation is, what form of meditation we should experience, and what the fruitage is, so that it becomes to you not a task, not a necessary part of your day from the standpoint of duty, but a necessary part from the standpoint of spiritual fulfillment. Now we have some questions that will come in right here. And the first is that the disciples understood that Jesus spake unto them of John the Baptist, when he said, But I say unto you that Elias is come already, and they knew him not. Can we believe that Jesus was referring to reincarnation, whereby a man returns again and again until the Christ consciousness is attained? Frankly, I do not know. I do not know whether Jesus was referring to reincarnation. I do not know even what those references meant when he asked, Who do men say that I am? And they said, the Hebrew prophet come back to life. They may have been referring to reincarnation, but I'm too unfamiliar with those things to know. One thing is certain, that reincarnation from the standpoint of the infinite way is an experience that we all go through many, many times until the Christ consciousness is attained. And by that, I mean this. At one time, some of us at least, were in what we would call a very mortal, material state of consciousness, in which the only things that seemed real were external things, pleasures of the external realm, profits, supply of the external realm, strength, health, all things attained in the external world through external objects and persons. And that at one time, and it was a transitional experience, although not one of death, we passed from that state of consciousness through our first understanding of metaphysics or truth to where we realized that a healing had been achieved not through an external means, but through prayer, through something as intangible to the material sense as prayer. Now just imagine, to a person of mortal material consciousness, all of a sudden finding something wonderful taking place by means of something he had never seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled. Just seems impossible, doesn't it? But with that taste came more and more experiences, and as one healing followed another, and one change of character followed another, and characteristic, and one's nature changed, the day came when somebody said, you know, you're not the same fellow I knew. And that was right. That was a reincarnation right there. The passing or transition from mortal material sense to some measure of mental or spiritual consciousness. Now, that was all very fine for a while, because now we knew not only that we could have harmony and joy and peace in the outer realm through external means, but that we also could have these joys and pleasures and profits through spiritual means. Of course, we still were thinking in terms of dollar bills when we said supply, but now we were going to accomplish them spiritually or mentally instead of physically. We still were thinking of a heart that beat so much, and lungs and liver and gallbladder that operated in such and such a fashion, only now instead of bringing it about through physical means, we were going to bring it about through spiritual means or mental means, whichever the case may have been. And so you see that it really was only a little transition from mortal material sense to about a halfway mark of spiritual sense. But it was a transition, and you might just as well acknowledge that that first man had died and a new one had been reborn, entirely dependent on spiritual means for attaining material good. But you know right well that that couldn't last forever, that the day eventually came when another transition had to be made. And the realization dawned that supply isn't material, body isn't material, the universe isn't material. Why, my kingdom is not of this world at all. There are joys that the people of this world never even dreamed. There is a sense of health of which nobody in mortal or material sense, or even the mental or halfway spiritual sense, ever conceived of. Oh no, there is another world, a new world. My kingdom is not of this world. My kingdom is the kingdom of heaven. Oh, we had just been using heaven to get a little better earth. But now we find out there really is a heaven. And then the old earth and the old heaven, the first earth and the first heaven were washed away, and we came into the new earth, the new heaven and the new earth, and found that it was purely spiritual. And now we weren't thinking of using spirit to get a human companion. We began to understand the meaning of spiritual companionship. We weren't using spirit to make the heart beat faster or slower, or bring up or down the pulse or blood pressure. No, no, no. Now we entered a world, a consciousness, in which spirit was one's only health, one's only supply, and here again, you see, was another transition. And again, our second man, who had been dying for a long time, now is completely dead, and we find him resurrected, this time probably more than resurrected, ascended into a divine state of consciousness in which the measurements were no longer earthly measurements. Now you see, we have there, you might call it another reincarnation, or you may call it another death, resurrection, rebirth. You know that we are told in Scripture that we must die daily and be reborn. I doubt that it means that we must be buried as well as die. It's enough to die without being buried. Let's die and remain here for the rebirth. And if we call it reincarnation, no harm. It's a rebirth. And someday, that transitional experience will go on and on and on until the actual ascension above all sense of this world. And then, of course, there will be no more reincarnation, because there will be no place to be reborn into. We will have achieved the complete and perfect virginal spiritual birth or sense of being. And to my sense, and this is the way it is interpreted in the message of the Infinite Way, this is the reincarnation, this is the dying daily and the rebirth that goes on continuously until complete ascension, after which there is no more dying or being born again. Now this is a very important question, and the answer to it is very important. Suppose a practitioner has three who come to her for help. One for an apartment, another because of marital difficulties, and the third, the overcoming of an illness. Does she put all three names in the pot, so to speak, and turning within, seek to help them through her realizing the Christ within her, or does she have to realize the Christ within each one individually? Now let me explain that very, very carefully. Healing is done at the point of contact with the practitioner, and therefore it can only be done one at a time. In other words, you may ask for help, and at the moment that you ask for help, something must take place within my consciousness. It has to. And what is that something? Whatever it is that brings to me the realization of God as the only being or the only law. And so if I receive a call, and this is for an apartment, the chances are the first thought that would come to me was that God had no need of apartments. And that would be about the end of the treatment, because the claim here is that there's a need of an apartment, and that I'll never believe. I doubt you can confine the life which is God, the mind which is God, the soul which is God, into an apartment. And of course, we know only pure spiritual being. We only know God as your being. We have no awareness of a mortal seeking some form of good, because a mortal is a mortal and an illusion whether they have an apartment or haven't. And we aren't dealing with people who have apartments or who need them. We are dealing and recognizing only one thing: God, expressed as individual being in all of its innate perfection, without a blemish, and having no needs. And that very quickly would be about the treatment. Now, of course, it would do no good to rehearse that, to memorize it, and repeat it when someone calls upon you for an apartment, because that may not be the treatment by then, or it may not be the treatment that would come to you, and as a matter of fact, it may never again come to me. It could very well be that my thought would never go in that direction a second time. That when somebody asks for an apartment, it may well be to me, it may well be that to me would come some other realization of the activity of the Christ as being one's all-sufficiency. And that would end that treatment. But of this I ask you to take note. The treatment would be given almost before the telephone receiver were on the hook. Or if I were reading a letter, it would be accomplished before I ever got to the bottom of the page. The moment I saw the nature of the claim, it would be instinctive with me to give the treatment or realize the necessary truth. Now, that leaves me free for the next case. But let us suppose for a moment that I did not receive a quick response while getting that call or reading the letter. Let us suppose now I do not react properly and I do not get the sense of all is well. Then I would sit back for a moment, meditate, find my inner peace, realize that oneness with God until that peace came, and then I would consider the treatment complete. Always the treatment is not complete until one has satisfied their own spiritual sense of well-being. Now I'm ready for the next case, and here we have one of marital difficulties. Well, you remember I said last night that of course we have no advice to offer, therefore we have nothing to do with the human aspects of the case. But I have found this in marital cases, that the greatest help has come when I realized that God was only one and not two. I have never accepted two becoming one. I have never accepted the human picture as having anything to do with the divine, and therefore I have never felt that God was divisible. And so if God is one, then that ends all sense of separation or division or difficulty or differences. God is one. Whether God is you or God is me, God is one. And in this oneness, there is just oneness, allness, completeness, perfection, harmony, and wholeness. And by keeping my treatment up on that level, I have been enabled to have good results in that type of work. However, remember this, I never come down to the level of trying to patch up quarrels. Never come down to the level of trying to hold couples together or bring about a separation. Never. The spiritual work is not a patching up of the human scene. It is a complete realization of God as the only being, individual being, complete and full. It is true that God embodies, to our sense, the qualities of male and female. God embodies the qualities of creative principle of life, but also protective and caring principle of life. But it's all in God in one, to our sense, appearing as man and woman or male and female. But the truth is, God is one. And being not divisible, certainly being inseparable, and always perfect and complete, I would, within a minute or two or three, receive that assurance, and that would be that. And if not, then again I would sit down, establish that peace and quiet within myself until the assurance came that all is well, and I would consider that a treatment. Now we go to the third, and we have a call for the overcoming of an illness. And of course there the treatment would vary in every case. Sometimes when these calls come, we are on a sufficiently high plane of consciousness so that it is really instantaneously clear that in God is only perfection, and God is one's only being, the only substance, the only law. However, some cases present themselves to us, and they do not yield that readily. And so we may go further. And supposing that the case were one dealing with mind illness of some kind, mental illness, it might be necessary consciously to realize that God is the only mind, and it is the mind of individual being. Or, supposing the illness was something to do with law, like a law of infection, or a law of contagion, or a law of hereditary disease, or any law, a law of accident, and there it would be necessary to realize that not only God is the only law, God is the only lawgiver, and God is the only enforcer of law, and anything else claiming to be law or to act as law must be negation. Nothing claiming to be something, a mirage, an illusion, absolutely without foundation, without cause, and without effect. Well, sometimes a claim involves something dealing with activity, like paralysis, or activity of the heart, or activity of the bowels, or activity of the lungs. And there again you commence to realize God as omni-action, God as the only activity of life, God as the only activity of being and of body, and you establish within yourself that sense of God action, God being, and you get your freedom in that direction. And so each one meets it in a different way. I have had cases of unborn children or newly born children, And usually the very first thing that comes into my mind is that in all this world there's no such thing as children. There couldn't possibly be a child anywhere, since God is always at the point of absolute maturity. God is always at the absolute point of complete perfection. It is not 4 months to the harvest, but if you could see spiritually, you'd know that the harvest is already complete before the seed is in the ground. And so it is with the child. Child conceiving and childbearing is only a concept of human belief. Actually, nothing like that takes place. What we call the conception and birth of a child is in reality God unfolding and disclosing and reveal itself in just another of its infinite form and variety. But it is still God, the full and complete God, unfolding and disclosing itself. Then you say, why do we see a person develop, grow from infancy to maturity? And then I say to you that what we are witnessing is the unfolding of this idea, not its birth or growth. It would be like watching a moving picture that is already complete on that film, and we watch it as it goes on in time and space from the beginning to the happy ending. But remember that that did not take place in that manner. That was a complete picture all on the screen at one time, nearly unfolding in time and space to our view. And so it is, the baby maturing is just an activity of God unfolding in time and space to our view. But actually it was all complete in the beginning. It had its full maturity, its full being in the beginning, and always has been, always will be. And just that realization is a treatment under all of these cases of unborn children and newly born children. Let us realize God can't be born. God can't be conceived. Neither the life of God, nor the mind of God, nor the soul of God can be conceived. It can only unfold. You see, in these treatments, you are again learning that our entire treatment deals with God, not with mortal man whose breath is in his nostril. Our entire treatment deals with God and stays on the level of God and never comes down. Now, let us say that we have completed our 3 treatments. And as you see, we did not jumble them all up in a hat and give one treatment. Oh, no. Every one was treated individually as it came through. But now, let us suppose that an hour or two later, case number 1 comes back to my thought. They may telephone again and say, I'm still searching for that apartment, or they may make no contact with me visibly, and yet no matter how busy I am, the thought of them will come into my mind, or the thought of that apartment not yet located. And now again, even though the patient hasn't asked for it, now again I have to give another treatment. Because it's come back to my mind, it's undoubtedly unfinished business. And probably this time the thought might come, that's funny, here's someone looking for an apartment, over here there's an apartment probably wishing it had somebody in it, and it shows how ridiculous the picture is. And then comes this thought to my mind: the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Oh, well, all right, if there's such a thing as an apartment, it must belong to God. So we let God dispose of it, and we let God find it. And so again, the treatment has been satisfactorily met in my thought, and that may end it. We may have a happy conclusion, we may not. But if we receive any other call about it, or if it comes back to mind again that day, something else must be done. And so it will continue until I arrive at such a point of satisfaction in my treatment about that apartment, such a sense of completeness and it is doneness, that I get a telephone call, I've got 3 apartments to choose from. Well, so again, we may never again hear of this marital difficulty, or we may receive another call tonight, tomorrow, the next day, and this again calls for instantaneous realization. If not, we have to come back to it later. We keep coming back to it until we arrive at a place within our own being where we feel it is done. And only then is that thing complete with us. Sometimes that completes the demonstration. At other times we may hear 2 or 3 days later that there is still trouble or more of it. Well, we have to go right back again with our treatment, and we continue on that line, and if the case is brought to us for a year or 2 or 3, we keep on in that line until something happens. Either the patient quits us for some other practitioner, or the healing takes place. Now then, you say, why in some cases does it take so long? Well, there are so many reasons for that. Sometimes the practitioner really doesn't rise high enough in consciousness to meet that particular case. Evidently, the disciples did wonderful healing work when Jesus was with them, because it is only occasionally that they have to bring someone to him that they couldn't heal, and then he tells them, if you just had a little more faith, a little more understanding, if you had only reached a deeper level of consciousness, you would have done it too. And so with us, the mere fact that so many cases are not met by one practitioner, but are met by the very next one or the next one, shows that it could have been met at any time by anyone, except for one thing, that probably the practitioner did not rise high enough in consciousness. Oh, I'm speaking now of a practitioner who understands what they're about and knows their work and has a consciousness. You may go to 90 practitioners who do not know what the practice really is and has no right concept of it and get no answer. But I'm speaking now of the fact that you may go to a practitioner who does know what it's all about and you may not get the result. And there may be 2 reasons. One is that the practitioner may not at that moment have risen to a high enough consciousness to meet it, and the second one is this: sometimes there are more things to healing than merely a restoration of physical symptoms and body. Sometimes it is much more important that the individual be spiritually awakened than that they merely have their physical healing. And in that case, you may not be able to rouse them out of their lethargy until this spiritual awakening comes. Then the healing follows quickly. So do not take all cases of a lack of healing or a lack of immediate healing to mean failure. It may, on the contrary, mean a great success, because the very delay in healing may awaken 1, 2, or 3 people in a family, or a dozen people in a family, to a great spiritual realization. And it is far better that that healing be delayed for that purpose, not by the practitioner, but delayed through the unawakening of the patient, and then find that this awakening brought all of them into spiritual light. Never attempt to give group treatments. Never do that. Treatment and healing work, these represent an activity of a practitioner's consciousness. But the practitioner's consciousness responds when the call is made upon it, and every time that the call is made upon it. Now then, what sometimes appears to be group healing, or putting a lot of cases all together, is when a practitioner arises in the morning or gets up in the middle of the night, and without any thought for individual cases, merely turns to God in their conscious oneness for the sake of communion with God, then they are not touching any of their cases, but any of their cases that are reaching out to them are going to be healed. And there may be 4 or 5 of them in 1 minute. That is not because the practitioner is treating in a group. No, no, no. We never are guilty of that. It is because we are making our conscious oneness with God, having communion with God, and everybody then who reaches out and touches us at that moment finds healing. You made it very clear last night, we are not to talk about this hidden manna unwisely, but rather let those who are seeking it come to us. How about those in the world who are not yet aware, but who we see around us in need of healing? Do you advocate treating these people, or just lightly knowing the Christ is within them and one day they will become aware of it and seek the light? In other words, being willing to help, but not taking on the appearance. To what extent am I my brother's keeper? Well, let us make this very clear. As we go about this world and are made aware of the sins, diseases, deaths, lacks, limitations, murders, divorces, wars, and rumors of wars, we do not treat anyone or anything. We treat ourselves. We treat ourselves. Even when someone asks for help, we don't treat them. I never mentioned once about treating any person. It is the claim that comes to us that receives the treatment, not the person. Never once in all these treatments tonight have I referred, or any night, to treating a person. The only one that is ever treated is the practitioner. The practitioner is always treating himself or herself. For what? Because of this claim presenting itself to the practitioner's thought, and the practitioner must do something about it. He mustn't do anything to the patient. No, 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 to the claim, as it presents itself to his own thought. Do you see that? In our work, we never take the name of a person. We never consider their identity. We never think of them once they have asked for help. All we think of is the claim. Here we had the claim of looking for an apartment. But whether it was Jones, Brown, or Smith is of no interest to us. The claim isn't the person. The claim is the absence of an apartment. Now, what do I know about the absence of an apartment? Well, I know a lot of things. First place, I know there isn't an absence of anything because everything is included in God. God is infinite. But I certainly know that there isn't anyone needing an apartment, since God is man's only being. Now, we were talking about marital difficulties, and I gave no one a treatment. I said that God was the only life, indivisible, inseparable, and perfect. Now, I don't know who called and asked for help. I've had 3 calls today from people who never mentioned their name. Had 2 yesterday. Now, I don't know who they are. But that has nothing to do with the healing. The healing has to do with the practitioner's realization of the omnipresence of God. Will you memorize that? The healing has to do with the practitioner's recognition of the omnipresence of God. That's where the major part of the responsibility is. I have said that in a minor degree we have other situations enter in, as for instance when there is some need for an individual's awakening, then you just keep on and keep on until that individual awakens, but you don't awaken them. The Christ awakens them through your recognition of truth. You never impress a treatment on their thought. You never take their name into a meditation, or their face or figure or identity. Never. If you do, you're treating an illusion. Let us, for a moment, go back to our very famous illustration of the snake in the rope. And here we have a snake in the rope. At least it seems so in that semi-darkness. Now, are we going to give a treatment to, well, let's say what now? The snake or the rope? Rope doesn't need one, it is rope. Snake you can't give one to, there isn't any. Now what gets the treatment? The practitioner gets the treatment because the practitioner is the one who has had the claim of a snake brought to him. And it's up to the practitioner to come to the realization that what is appearing as snake is rope. That's all. No use treating a patient about that. A patient has nothing to do with it. What has to do with it is a claim of a selfhood apart from that which is there. What is there is rope. What claims to be there is snake. So let us turn away from the appearance to the practitioner. And let us see what the practitioner knows. Now let us say that the practitioner seems to know that of course there's no snake there, but on the other hand can't see the rope either. And so he doesn't know what the truth is. You see, the truth in this case would be rope. But the practitioner doesn't know it. It's obscured. There's so much snake there that he just cannot see the rope and can't know that the rope is there, and therefore can't make a declaration of rope. Now what does the practitioner do? Turn to the Father and say, Father, interpret this scene to me, please. Let me see this as it is. And that's the finest treatment there is. That's better than all the declarations in the world. Better than anything you can do is just to say, Father, wait a minute, they say there's a snake here. Well, I know it. That can't be. But what is there? That's what I don't know. What is there? And the Father will pretty soon say, come on, don't you see a rope out there? And it'll be made so clear that you will see it. So don't forget, will you? We have nothing to do with people in this. We have nothing to do with persons, places, or things in our treatment. We have to do with the claim that's presented to us and the recognition of the fact that as snake it doesn't exist, but the mere fact that there's a presence of a snake there certainly indicates something is there. If we could just see it, it's rope, but at the moment it's obscured, and so we'll turn to the Father and say, Father, interpret this for me. And we'll get the right answer. So then, we are going about the world, and we are beholding people who need healing, who need awakening. And what are we to do about it? Well, I will repeat the experience of one of our students who recently rode home one evening in a bus, and a very intoxicated man on the seat in front of her, and she merely sat there and in quietness and peace of her own being realized God as man's only being, realized the Christ as the only reality. She didn't treat the man. She didn't even bother with his drunkenness. All she did was sit there and dwell, commune with the divine idea of God's presence, God's wholeness, the omnipresence of Christ. And then the man turned around and said, "Thank you, ma'am, for praying for me." And he was sober. Do you see why, don't you? There's only one mind, and he felt that going on there, and it sobered him, and he even felt the direction from which it was coming. Now, she didn't treat a man, and she didn't treat drunkenness. All she did was go within and silently and peacefully commune with the Father within, and probably express gratitude that Christ was the only mind and the only life, and there was none beside that. Well, that same thing would apply if you were walking along the street and you saw deformity, if you saw insanity, if you saw an accident. There's only one thing to do. Go within. Feel the divine peace of God's presence. Realize that all of this that you're witnessing is an illusion. It isn't really happening. You don't for a minute believe there's God and an accident, do you? Which are you going to believe, God or the accident? Huh?
Right.
Yes, of course you have to believe God. Of course you have to believe God. We have a colored maid who said that a friend of hers went to his home one afternoon unexpectedly and found his wife being embraced by another man. And he started to remonstrate with her when she said, "Wait a minute, honey, wait a minute, honey. You believe your eyes or you believe your honey?" Well, which is it? Do you really believe there's God in an accident? No, but the eyes testify to the accident, don't they? Well, which are you going to believe? Your eyes or this inner intuition, this inner conviction that says God is the only reality? There can't be God in that. Well, the same thing. What difference does it make whether it's intoxication, whether it's drugs, whether it's insanity, poverty, a beggar, the woman taken in adultery? What difference does it make? Do you believe there is God and it? Or can that only exist as a false, illusory sense? Well, you want to know something? That's the only treatment there is. That is how you bless your neighbor as yourself, and that is how you pray for your enemy. Your enemy is every appearance of sin, disease, discord, lack, and limitation. Your enemy is never a person. Your enemy is always an appearance. And there's only one way to pray for an appearance, and that is to ask yourself, can I believe my eyes? Or must I believe these mystics, these people who have had an intuitive contact with God and who have come out of it and said, there is no evil, there is no sin, disease, or death. There's no reality to it. There's no substance, no law, no cause, no effect. Now, are we to believe material sense or that still small voice that says, I will never leave you nor forsake you, and so nothing can happen to you? Do you see that? That is how you treat this. That is how you go around the world being a blessing and a benediction. Don't treat people and don't try to realize the Christ in them. That realizing of Christ in them, that is not. Realize Christ as their being. Realize Christ as the only being. If necessary, just realize Christ. Just feel Christ, the warmth of divine love within your own being, and the assurance, judge not after appearances, judge righteous judgment.